So welcome to the contest webinar, a part of the program Quality Webinar Series. This is the agenda, and we're going to keep on referring back to the agenda just so that everybody can follow where we're at. We're going to start with basics, where we're going to cover disclaimers and benefits. Then later on, part 2 is who does what. Part 3 is getting a little more in depth on the actual briefings. Part 4, just focus areas that I wanted to bring your attention to. And at the very end, I will advertise the next webinar. We'll have a little Q&A, and we'll have a raffle time. The raffle item tonight, as many of you know, is to 3 lucky winners will have 1 trio member attend their club, area, or division contest as whatever your preference might be. So, and we will act as either the chief judge or contest master. It's up to you to decide. So I personally think that's one of the best prizes we've had so far because really we win, you win, it's lovely. So disclaimers. The first disclaimer, and this is very important, is that this presentation is based on the 2017-2018 rulebook. You should always review the current rulebook because the rules may change every year. And they often do. Sometimes it's small things, but there was 1 year when they changed the disqualification timing for table topics. So you really want to make sure that you are referring to the most recent rulebook if you reference this webinar years from now, which I hope you will. Disclaimer number 2, the district does not make the contest rules. We make we make suggestions for best practices, which are not rules, but anything that's on the rule book is dictated by international, and we can't contradict that. And the disclaimer number 3, contest enthusiasm is contagious. Anna asked me to specify that the district is not responsible for excess contest enthusiasm that might arise from this webinar. But I will say, if you experience that issue, you can feel free to get in touch with me, Gina at district31.org. The benefits of having a contest. It brings the club together. It helps members work on different projects and work towards their award, which if you're a club officer in turn helps you meet your own goals. It provides exposure to the Toastmasters world outside the club. It's a networking opportunity. It challenges club members because a lot of the time you're speaking in front of the same audience all the time, and that's an audience that you develop a level of comfort with. So it's great to go outside the club and try speaking in front of other people in a high-pressure environment. And finally, it's a great way of getting people into leadership and gauging their skills, because if you as VP Ed this year are thinking you might want to be president next year, you may want to choose someone to be your contest chair that you may want to see also run for an officer role and see how you guys work together and get a sense of the things they're good at, things they need to work on, whatever the case may be. And to be more specific in terms of credit for contest planning, you can get credit for Competent Leaders projects number 6 or 10. And also you could turn it into a high performance leadership project, but a cautionary note on this is that the high performance leadership project, unlike other projects with Toastmasters, you kind of have to follow a process as you go through the planning. So just make sure that you do that, and please do reference the December webinar, which was about the high performance leadership project. It's only about 15 to 20 minutes, and it'll explain what the planning process are and even provide a little checklist for you. So now part 2, who does what? First of all, who's responsible for the contest? At the club level, the VP of Education finds the contest chair. At the area level, typically the area directors serve as contest chairs or co-chairs. They can also select separate contest masters if they like, and we'll go into that later. And then at the division level directors typically serve as contest chairs. Who participates in the contest? The rules are, for all contests, it has to be a member in good standing of a club in good standing. So that means that you've paid your dues and that your club has had enough people pay their dues. Second, you must not be a district leader. So if you're an area director, a division director, or a part of the trio, you cannot compete at any contest, in part because you will be hosting them. For the international contest, the requirements get more specific. You have to have been a Toastmaster for 6 months. This is an example of a new rule. This wasn't a rule before, so always check the rule book. And you must have completed at least 6 speeches from the Confident Communicator Manual, which has always been the case. The only exception is somebody who's a member of a club that has chartered less than 1 year before the club contest takes place. So if you're a brand new club, please go ahead and have an international contest. It'll be great. Volunteer roles. A contest requires 14 volunteer roles at the very least. So you need 1 contest chair. You can have 2 if you'd like. I've seen a lot of co-chairs, especially for area contests. You need 1 chief judge. You need a minimum of 5 voting judges at the club and area levels. There's 1 tie-breaking judge, which is actually anonymous. That is picked by the chief judge, but we'll cover that later too. 3 ballot counters, 2 timers, and 1 sergeant at arms. So who's the contest chair? I would describe it as the face of the event. The contest chair coordinates contest volunteers and the overall progression. The contest chair also briefs the contestants. And as I mentioned earlier, typically the contest chair acts as the contest master, which is the Toastmaster for the contest. But a lot of the time, the contest chair could decide to assign someone else to perform the contest master role. The chief judge, it's really the background operations, and the contest can only be fair if you have somebody that is at the very least very aware of what the rules are, because the chief judge is the keeper of the rules, so to speak. The chief judge also handles disputes and disqualifications, which we will go into later on. The chief judge briefs judges, timers, and counters, and also selects a secret tie-breaking judge. Note that the tie-breaking judge is only known to the chief judge. All judges are anonymous to the audience, but the judges know who each other are, except for the tie-breaking judge. Some areas of confusion with the chief judge. The chief judge, despite the name, is actually not a voting judge. The chief judge does not fill out a ballot. And also the chief judge is not anonymous. In fact, you should make sure that the audience knows who they are, because that's the person that's going to let you know, yes, we are ready for the contest, everybody's been briefed. And also if contestants or judges had a dispute, they would bring it to the chief judge or to the contest chair. Voting judges, at least 5. In addition, there's the tie-breaking judge. I just want to make sure that that distinction comes up a lot, because you do need a total of 6 judges. It's just that the 6th one is the tie-breaking one at the club level. At the area level, you either need equal representation from each club in your area or a minimum of 5 voting judges, again, not including the tiebreaker. And at the division level, it's 7 voting judges, not including the tiebreaker. Above the area level, meaning for the division and district level and for the international, of course, the judges cannot be in the same club as any of the contestants. For the area and club, they can be, but for division and district, they cannot. The tie-breaking judge, as I mentioned, secret, only known to the chief judge and elected by the chief judge. The tie-breaking judge does not participate in the regular judge's briefing, but we will cover the briefing. The tiebreaker judge receives a different ballot, and this is why it's so important that you make sure you brief that person, because the ballot requires that all contestants be ranked in order, whereas for a regular voting judge, they only elect 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place. And finally, the tie-breaking judge hands the ballot directly to the chief judge, and the ballot of the tie-breaking judge is only used in the event of a tie. 3 ballot counters. They collect the ballots from the voting judges, and then they count the ballots. 2 timers, 1 to show cards or signal, whatever, if you have a light or any device you're choosing. one to operate the actual timing device. And the reason you need two is that timing is the one way you can get disqualified in any of the contests. So there are contests that have other reasons to get disqualified, but for all the contests, you must meet the timing requirements. So it's crucial that you have people that are able to pay attention and don't have to multitask. And then the one sergeant at arms. Essentially, the sergeant at arms greets guests and also becomes a door guard during the contest, ideally not allowing people to leave or enter the room during the speeches. And for tabletop-based and evaluation contests, during the time, because these contests involve content that is based on the same thing, they have to escort all the contestants out and then bring them in one by one. And an area of confusion here is some people think that the sergeant at arms of the club, that's the club officer, has to be the sergeant at arms for the contest. They're welcome to do so if they'd like to, but they don't have to. In fact, the sergeant at arms can compete in the contest if they so choose to. So usually you would pick someone else to perform this role. Now back to the agenda. Now that we've discussed the basics and who does what, let's get into the briefings. First of all, some key resources for briefings are the rule book. We will share these slides so you can actually click on these links. And at the end, we're going to have a little demo of where to go in the district website. So the rule book, that's my favorite thing. Some of you might know I carry one in my purse all the time. Maybe I shouldn't announce this in a webinar, but it's true. The chief judge briefing notes, I find, are one very helpful way of making sure that as chief judge, you cover your bases. And the checklist too, just making sure you mentioned all the things that you were supposed to mention, but neither one of those things are supposed to be substitutes for actually reviewing the rule book. Some best practices. For the chief judge, try to brief all of the contest officials at once, because that way you can just say, hey, anybody that's a judge, timer, or counter, please come follow me outside, and you're not compromising the anonymity of the judges. The judges can remain anonymous because people don't know who exactly was doing what, and it's just a bigger group of people leaving. And it also just helps other contest officials understand each other's roles. So maybe you're a counter this time, but you may want to be a judge in the future. So it's good to get a sense of what that entails. And for contest chair, I recommend that you always send an email to contestants and tell them the time the briefings will start in advance. And then try to stick to it because it's what's fair for the contestants that show up on time. There might be contestants who are very considerate and let you know that they can't make it until a certain time. So you can always make decisions on a case-to-case basis in terms of whether you want to plan to have a little chat with that particular contestant, but just try to stick to the general format and keep it so that everybody knows what to expect. The contestant briefings are done by the contest chair. This is important. The speaking order is determined during the contestant briefings, not before. I have had a couple of people do that, and it's not really fair to the contestants because, first of all, the rule is very clear. This is a rule, not a best practice, that you should choose while the contestants are there. And second of all, some people feel like the order in which you go makes a difference. So it's important that the process is transparent. Also, make sure you discuss the rules on timing and on speaking area, and also on disqualifications. Then also make sure you review the speaking area and make contestants understand that this is a point of confusion. So the speaking area is something that you can't get disqualified for, but you, as a judge, somebody can choose to take points off under physical. In fact, the ballot clearly states that that's something that you can choose to consider as part of your ballot. And I would recommend that you also define the speaking area beforehand. I've seen people sometimes ask contestants what they think the speaking area should be. And while in some ways that's very kind, it actually could lead to issues where if the contestants don't agree, you would have problems, but also you just want to have that information available for the chief judge so that the chief judge can tell the judges what the speaking area is supposed to be and go from there. And finally, for props, this question does come up a lot, and the page 14 of the rule book has a whole paragraph on this. But in essence, the contestant must notify you, the contest chair, or notify the contest chair that they are going to have props, and also the props need to be simple enough that they can be set up during the minute of silence prior to the contestant's speech, and then removed from the stage in the minute of silence following the speech. What happens if contestants don't attend the briefing? Contestants can compete even if they don't attend the briefing. In the event that a contestant is not at the briefing, they, first of all, forgo their right to have a briefing. That's part of it. But also, and that's why you want to announce it in advance, but also just have someone pick a position for them as if the person was present. Don't just have them go last, because that's not really fair to the other contestants. You want to make sure that they are treated equally. Also, any contestants that are not present once the contest starts are no longer eligible to compete, even if they arrive before it's their turn to speak. You may be wondering, if you happen to have the second place person around, they are allowed to attend the briefing, and if the contestant that won the first place is not there when the contest starts, they are welcome to take on that slot. Again, the rule book covers all of this on page 10, but I wanted to make sure that I cover that piece because it's kind of complicated, and I've seen a few people get confused about that. The timer briefings. This is really a best practice for meetings, but for contests, it is mandatory that the card be held up in a place that is visible to the contestants, but not to the audience. And keep in mind, judges are told not to pay attention to the timing. They are judging the speeches. That's why you have somebody timing, and then the chief judge will check if they went over or were under time, and then whether they were disqualified as a result. So the green card, when it comes up, needs to stay up until the yellow card comes up. Then the yellow card needs to stay up until the red card comes up. And then the red card must stay up until the end of the speech. Make sure the timers know that no other signal should be given. Sometimes I think as a timer, you're tempted to kind of have the big eyes like, oh my gosh, you are about to be disqualified, but they should try to stay as neutral as possible, because for everybody, it's the same, and you should know that once you see the red card, you should really move off the stage as soon as possible. In terms of a timing device, try not to use a cell phone, but if you must use a cell phone, please make sure it's on airplane mode to avoid technical difficulties due to incoming calls, texts, emails, tweets. No political context here. If a technical feature happens during the timing with the signal or the timing device, the speaker is allowed 30 seconds overtime before disqualification. So the timer should make a note on there just so that you as chief judge are aware that this extra time needs to be granted because something failed with the timing. Judges' briefings, so make sure that the chief judge should really be reviewing a few very important things. So first of all, sources of bias. We all try our best not to be biased, but sometimes or always I appreciate the reminder of different things that as a human being might make me biased, like the halo effect, the reverse halo effect, picking the underdog, or picking the person that always wins. I could list them all, and actually they are all listed on the District 31 website. So as chief judge, you just have to go look at it. The judging criteria is clearly written on the back of the ballot. I think it's good to ask judges to take a moment to review it during the briefing and ask questions. This is a best practice, but it is important because sometimes people don't review the criteria in the back, and that can lead to some complications because you don't want to be reviewing the criteria while you're judging. You want to be giving the speech your full attention during that time if you're a judge. Then also make sure that you cover the speaking area piece and also how it affects the scoring and how judges may choose to lower points under physical. And then remind judges that they can follow you out. And again, this is from the perspective of the chief judge who briefs the judges. The judges can follow you out if they're not done with their ballot once the contest chair is done with the 2 minutes. They should not rush a decision if they're not sure. And something else that's important is that there are no ties, in the sense that if a judge lists 2 people on second place, for instance, then that ballot is void. So they need to break the tie themselves. Again, do please refer to the chief judge notes. This is more of a general overview. It doesn't go into every detail. The tie-breaking judge briefing, I included this because some people really don't think the tie-breaking judge needs to be briefed because the tie-breaking judge does not go to the normal briefings. But actually, it is crucial for the tie-breaking judge to be briefed, because I know it has happened to some people that the tie-breaking judge has been a judge before, but not a tie-breaking judge before. So they might put only first and second and third place and leave the other rankings out. And the way you use that ballot is you really need to know how they ranked all the contestants with respect to each other. Because if Mary and Anna tied for second place, but the tie-breaking judge only had Anna in the top 3 and not Mary, then how are you supposed to know for sure about the ranking? Or maybe he didn't have either one of them. Especially at the division level, that really could happen. So make sure the tie-breaking judge knows to rank all the contestants. And lastly, the tie-breaking judge must only hand their ballot to the chief judge, not to the other counters, because 1, the tie-breaking judge is anonymous, and 2, the ballot will only get used in the event of a tie. So now that we've covered the basics, who does what, and the briefings, I wanted to bring the spotlight to a few focus areas, starting with key rules, a little chat about disqualifications, a few notes on awards, some frequently asked questions, and then we're going to do a little demo of the resources and where they are available on District 31. Key rules. A contestant should only be a contestant, not a volunteer in any other capacity. It's unfortunate, but I have heard of people that have been planning to have the contestants be ballot counters or judges or anything other than contestants. And that is not a good idea. It's clear on the rule book that you cannot do that. So please just don't rely on contestants to be your volunteers, other than if you need them to, I don't know, go grab the soda for you before the contest, if they're so kind. Toastmasters who are members in more than one club and who meet all other eligibility requirements are permitted to compete in each club contest in which paid membership is held. However, so you can compete at 2 clubs, but you cannot compete at for the same contest type in 2 areas, even if they're in different divisions or different districts. So if you're competing in the Area 32, District 31 area contest, for table topics, you may not compete in that contest in any other area or district or anywhere else. And finally, contestants must be active members of clubs in good standing. We've had a couple of unfortunate situations where contestants moved on to the next level, that somebody didn't verify that they were members of clubs in good standing, so they had paid their dues, but their clubs had fewer than the number of members that they needed to be a club in good standing. So just keep that in mind, because if they move on to the next level, then they would still get disqualified. The rule book is very clear that if you were not eligible to compete on an earlier level, even if that has changed now, you're still disqualified because you were not eligible to compete in the first place. And that's just a very difficult thing for clubs. So do please ask me about this rule if you have questions, because it's very confusing about exactly what that means and why it matters at every level. Now, for introducing the speakers. I know that as Toastmasters, for the Toastmaster role, we're very used to having the in-between statements and kind of being an MC, a host in a way that makes it fun, where you're making a comment before and after the speeches and kind of tying things down. That is one important difference between a Toastmaster and a contest master, that really your function as a contest master is to introduce the speakers by the format that's indicated by International, nothing more, nothing less. Later, during the contestant interviews, you can go crazy, have great transitions, and get all of that charisma out. But during the timing, when the speakers are happening, you got to stick to the format. So for the humorous and international and test speaker, name, speech title, name. For table topics, name, question, then you repeat the question again, and then you say the name again. This is important because the contestant has the right to hear the question twice. So just make sure that you always mention the question again, because they may not have heard it correctly the first time, and that's why this is in the rules. And then for evaluation, it's a little awkward, but you just say the name and then you say the name again. Keep in mind that, notice that I underlined test speaker in the introductory remarks. This is actually something that happened to a good friend of mine. She went to a club that wasn't her own on a Saturday morning, which that's a tough time to wake up to be the test speaker. And somebody made an introduction and she couldn't be the test speaker because nothing could be discussed about her goals or who she was. She had to be introduced in the name, speech title, and name. So that was a bad experience for my friend. But also imagine as a contest chair, hopefully you have a backup test speaker, because in my opinion, you should have a backup of everything possible, especially something like that. But if you don't, then all of a sudden you're in a very difficult position. So make sure that you follow this rule. Disqualifications. So let's go to the timing first, because that's easy. And then I'll tell you how to handle originality disputes. So for humorous, under 4.5 minutes or over 7 minutes. Evaluations under 1.5 minutes, over 3.5. Table topics under 1 minute or over 2.5. Again, always make sure that those timings are still the same if you review this webinar in the future. Handling originality disputes. People think this doesn't happen, but it actually happened to me. So what happened was, interestingly, the boyfriend of the person competing came to me and said, hey, I know that this person's speech was based on another speech that I know about, and I have a video of it. It was a famous person. I just don't want to give the personal details. So what I said was, you got to go tell your girlfriend, because she was competing, that she needs to bring that, because only contestants and judges can bring up originality disputes. So she did. And then I kind of looked at the video, seen legit, but either way, you have to then ask all the judges to leave the room, explain the situation, then bring the contestant out, explain the situation, ideally before they go into the judges' room, because honestly, treat them like you'd want to be treated, even if you think that the likelihood of the originality dispute being an issue is large. You want to just always be human about it and give them a heads up. Then they go into the room, and what I did was I played the video for an arbitrary amount of time. So I said, we're going to listen to the video for a minute. After the minute was done, I said, do people need to listen more? And some people did, so we listened to another minute. And then after that, the judges said that they were comfortable with the amount of time that they'd listen. And then they had a conversation. The contestant was allowed to have an opportunity to defend himself and explain what the issue might have been, just provide that explanation. Then the contestant goes back to the room, the judges have a conversation, and then they make a decision. When there's a disqualification due to originality, you say there was a disqualification. You don't necessarily say due to why. When it's a timing disqualification, you do specify it's due to timing. Some people may assume that if you say there's a disqualification, it's due to timing, but it doesn't say in the rule book whether you should say it's an originality dispute or not. But from my perspective, I think it's a best practice to just leave it at disqualification. Now, on a more fun side, awards. Those are so much more fun than disqualifications. Rules: if you have 5 or more contestants, you give third, second, and first, and you list them in that reverse order. If you have 4 people or fewer, you do second and first place in reverse order. Don't forget the certificates of participation. You would typically hand those out during the interviews as contest chair, so those are just nice to have. And the other thing that some people do is they print out the first, second, and third place certificate for every contestant, and then just use the ones that you need to use. So I'll print one for Sean, Ali, and Anna, and for first place, and whoever wins the first place I actually use, and the rest I recycle. But this came from our webinar support master. I think it's a great idea to print labels with all the contestants' names, and then you can pre-fill the rest of the form, and whoever wins, you just put the label. And if you use clear labels, then that really blurs the outline of the label, and the award looks very professional. So that's a tip for you from our webinar support sergeant, Sean. It's a great one. I will use it for sure. Frequently asked questions. What happens if there's a tie? We have a whole what happens if there's a tie handout in the District 31 webinar, but what happens is basically that the ranking in the tie-breaking judges ballot is used to break the tie, which I know I mentioned earlier, but that's why it's so important to have the tie-breaking judge rank everyone. What if I don't agree with a rule? Email contest@toastmasters.org with the change you want to see. They do change the rules every year. That's why there's a new rule book every year. So if there's something that you want to point out to them, email them. Can you compete with different speeches at different levels? Yes, you can use whatever speech you want or whatever level you want, except for international contests. The final speech has to be different from the speech you gave in the semifinals. So you could, if you wanted, compete with a different speech at every single level. That would be fine. I don't know why you would do that. That seems like a lot of work, but you could do that. You could also compete with the same speech at every single level except for the final. So just keep that in mind. If you, and I'm sure many of you are very talented folks who may actually get all the way to the semifinals, have that extra speech prepared. More frequently asked questions. Can contestants get speech credit for a contest speech? Absolutely. So definitely have them bring their competent communicator manual or whatever manual they choose to work on. Of course, they would want to try to focus this speech on the goals of the projects, but overall, yes, they should absolutely get credit. They're working very hard on that speech. And what does it mean for two areas to have a joint contest? I wanted to make sure to bring this up, that when two areas are having a joint contest, they're still having separate contests. They're just using the same resources. So if Area 32 and Area 33 have the humorous contest and the evaluation contest, then there should be a humorous winner for Area 32, a humorous winner for Area 33, whatever, and an evaluation winner for Area 32, an evaluation winner for Area 33. It's still a separate contest, and then those winners will compete against each other at the next level in the division. Resources. So now it's time for the demo. So I'm going to, instead of taking this link, which you should know, speech contest/contest resources, I'm just going to go to district31.org because that's so easy, right? Easy to remember, district31.org. So there you go to speech contest resources. So there's a little overview here, so you get a sense. There's just general information under overview. Planning resources, so 15-minute contest guide. If you are new to the idea of contests or if you need a refresher, this is a great resource because it gives you the planning at a glance in a way that's very digestible. The volunteer tracker, this is actually a Google sheet that you can use to track the volunteers that you need. Then here, we have contest chair scripts available. We have chief judge briefing notes and checklists, a link to the rule book. This is just a list of tie-breaking judges. The list of contest officials that we listed in one of the slides. We have a flyer for you to promote your contest, tie-break contest flyer, then contest kits. If you wanna, you can print these handouts out for free from International. So just by clicking here, we made it easy for you. We have a sample contest agenda, and we even have a sample contest agenda for joint contests. So maybe joint area contests, but I also know of a couple of clubs that decided to have a club contest together, and I think it's a great idea. So feel free to use that agenda. And we have scripts that also follow that that format, the general contest script for a single contest, and then the joint one, which is really focused on areas, but you could very easily modify it to be a joint club contest. And we have those for the fall contest and for the spring contest. So you could use those resources tomorrow. General resources, again, the rule book, my favorite book ever. Speech contest tutorials, some frequently asked questions that are a little more broad than what we came up with here. And what happens if there's a tie, and just more on conducting quality speech contests. So with that, we're going to go to the cherry on top. Of course, we have to use this opportunity for shameless promotion for the next webinar, Speaking Impromptu. It ties in perfectly. Now that you're going to have a contest, don't you want to make sure that some of the people who go to the contest get this special overview on how to do well in table topics? But if you don't plan to compete in a contest, a lot of us join Toastmasters to think on our feet. So you're going to get some very good tips. Please join us. It's February 15, 2018 at 7 p.m. Same channel, same location, unless you are in a ski lodge or something and won't be there next month rather. All right, so with that, I'm going to wrap up this recorded portion, and then we're going to open for Q&As. Thanks for listening.